Today we visit one of the most amazing urban developments going on the East Coast that's also soon to be one of the largest contiguous arboretums in the world. You won't want to miss it, so stay tuned as we garden smart from Georgia.
These moments of beauty and relaxation are brought to you by Proven Winners Flowering Shrubs, where every plant is performance tested, leaving you free to just enjoy. Find our award-winning shrubs at your local garden center.
Bring the outdoors into your everyday life. Bass Pro Shops can outfit all your adventures, even those in your backyard. Bass Pro Shops, your adventure starts here.
DRAM has been providing gardeners with professional equipment for over 75 years. DRAM products feature 9 water patterns and are designed to nurture your plants with a shower of rain. DRAM for lawn and garden, available at garden centers near you.
You have to rely on your gear. The way it feels, the way it does exactly what you need it to do. The F-Pace, how Jaguar makes it SUV.
Many American cities are changing rapidly and the way people use space is evolving. The long commutes are being traded for public transportation or short bike rides and walks. In this transition, many Americans no longer have their own gardens, but rather rely on public green space to enjoy nature. These concerns are becoming a meaningful part of the way that cities think about urban development. Thinking ahead to how people want to enjoy nature is of paramount importance. Every city faces unique challenges, and today we take a look at how Atlanta, Georgia sought to address the issues of transportation and connecting a city with nature. The Atlanta BeltLine is built on an old rail line that circled the inner city and was used to deliver provisions to businesses along its path. This forgotten pathway was quite overgrown in many places and took a tremendous effort to pull together the right mix of public support, funding from the city, and private sources. There's still much work to be done to complete it, but the 2 large sections of it that are open have been received by the city with open arms and have brought thousands of new residents into the neighborhoods that it touches. The BeltLine has become a new way of seeing the world and a recognition that we can shape the world around us into something that is beautiful, even when the obstacles are high. As a student at Georgia Tech, Ryan Gravel often contemplated ways in which Atlanta could address the growing problems of inadequate transportation and preserving green space in a rapidly growing city. Atlanta is a city in the forest, but as more development creeps in, those majestic forests start to slip away, often to never return. Ryan chose to tackle this challenge with his master's thesis that paved the way for a vision that is currently the Atlanta BeltLine. Ryan is an urban thinker, designer, author, speaker, and builder who works with cities on designing ideas that make for a better future. Today we get a deeper look into the mind of Ryan Gravel and the BeltLine that he dreamed of many years ago. Ryan, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for joining us.
That's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Ryan, you spent most of your life involved in urban development, which is, it can be a complicated issue. It certainly is different than the type of development that we typically see happening in the suburbs.
Right.
And I'd like for you to talk some about your philosophy. When you think about what is good urban development, what does that look like?
I come into this with the perspective of a designer. So think about architecture, but like at a city scale. And if you think about all the great cities in the world, they're enormously complex, you know, not just from a technical standpoint and transportation and water and sewer and all those things, but also super complex in the social and cultural conditions that kind of make them up. And so my role as a designer is to not be an expert in any of those fields, but bring those people together and design sort of the physical and social infrastructure that allows them to all do their good work and make their contributions in the world.
When we think about the great cities and when it's done well, it really is a quality of life issue.
Right.
We think about cities that say lack adequate green space
Right.
or adequate access to transportation, whether it's something like the BeltLine or just the basic road infrastructure.
Right.
So it's a lot of different components that have got to come together to really contribute to a vibrant city and, like I said, the quality of life.
And you're not starting from scratch, right? So you're starting usually with something existing already that has a history and a culture,
Right.
and people are all part of that. And so retrofitting that with some other aspiration that's better suited to the future is a big challenge, but also a lot of fun work. And obviously the BeltLine is a big part of that story, sort of retrofitting Atlanta into the kind of future Atlanta that we actually want to live in.
Right, and as you think about that, you've got historic buildings, you've got new construction, just a lot of considerations and concerns and aspects of that kind of development. It can be disruptive, but it also can be inspirational.
Yeah, but in any case, it's needed because the
Right.
city is going to nearly triple its population in the next 20 years.
Right.
So, something's going to happen. We should be thoughtful about what we want that to be.
Right, absolutely. Brian, the BeltLine was largely born of your master thesis at Georgia Tech a long time ago.
Yeah.
And for those who are not familiar with the project, I'd like for you to kind of just talk us through what the BeltLine is in its essence.
The idea is Atlanta's a railroad town. It was made by railroads, that's why it exists. But in addition to those central railroads, there's a loop going around the city. It's 22 miles long. By the late 90s, when I finished school, it was sort of mostly underutilized and abandoned. And I had this idea to reclaim that corridor for some other purpose. It was connected 45 different neighborhoods, about 4,000 acres of land that's old industrial land that was obsolete and being abandoned at the time mostly. So the idea was to reclaim it and repurpose it for some other use, some other kind of infrastructure that would revitalize those communities, incentivize economic development. It was built around transit. It added sort of this trail and greenway concept. And it was just a crazy idea that never imagined we would actually do. Just wanted to graduate, which I did. But I went to work at an architecture firm. We were doing mixed use kind of projects. I started telling my coworkers about this idea I had. And over the next few years, we just created this groundswell of public support, of citizen grassroots activism in support of this idea. And it just grew with all these different constituencies, different nonprofit partners advocating for housing and parks and transit, all those other pieces. And it empowered and ultimately obligated the elected officials in the city to take it on as a project and figure out how to do it. And it's obviously a long story, but it's been amazing to see it sort of really reinventing how people live their lives in Atlanta. On the one hand, it's about technical kind of infrastructure. Right? On the other hand, it's about taking this barrier that divided communities and bringing them together. And so it's very much a social space where people get out and experience the city.
Right, it's been a huge success, of course, I think by any measure. And it's something that was really, I feel, direly needed by the city. We think about, you mentioned transportation, and Atlanta's, it's not the worst city to commute in, but it's by no means the best. And when you think about what are the long-term solutions for people who live in town, getting from town to town or borough to borough, the BeltLine is an ingenious solution there, and it also takes a lot of cars off the road. We think about, how do we use outdoor space and even areas just to exercise? I think one of the great aspects of the BeltLine is that it's connecting all of these parks, and it offers miles of biking trails, running, but then also people to be connected to other parts of town that they really weren't before.
Yeah, that's right. If you don't have a tennis court or an auditorium in your neighborhood, you can get to one on the BeltLine. It's not only creating green space, public space along the way, it's connecting you to all that the city has to offer.
Let's talk about the economic development aspect of it, because it's undeniable the many of these neighborhoods that are now connected by the BeltLine, it's breathed a tremendous amount of new, fresh air into those communities, and all of a sudden we see communities that were kind of tired and run down that now have this really, really vibrant energy.
We spent about $500 million on the BeltLine so far, and in that same time period of the last 20 years, we've seen almost $6 billion of economic investment.
Wow.
It's a pretty great return on the investment from an economic standpoint. And what's really driving that is that it's creating the lives that people want, and that's attracting people and companies who want to invest who want to hire those people. And so it's this sort of virtuous cycle of supporting communities to revitalize, providing new services, new homes, new places to work, and then sort of that makes it even more attractive for other people to come.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the plans for the future of the Beltline. I know that light rail has been something that's discussed, and when I think about that just as a transportation solution, it makes incredible sense that all of a sudden, like, areas of town that it would seem impractical to get to at certain times of the day, it creates a solution for that I think is outstanding.
Yeah, it's this 22-mile sort of loop going through all these different communities, right at the edge of the communities where you've got capacity for higher density. So the trail becomes this sort of connecting hub between all these different trails across the region. Similarly, the transit connects to each of MART at each of the 4 compass points and other future transit lines that would come in and out of the city to help circulate people who live in the city to the places that they need to go. So the Beltline becomes this sort of idea on which a lot of other ideas come, including all these hundreds of acres of new parks and the Arboretum and the little beautiful things along the way and the broad sort of landscape.
Yeah, it's a very rare opportunity, I think, for Atlantans now, and very educational. You know, most of the trees that are planted out here have the botanical name markers on them.
Yeah, and Trees Atlanta runs all kinds of educational programs for kids and adults, tree plantings in the Arboretum on the Beltline itself, but also walking tours where they teach people about the trees and plants so that people who are living in a more increasingly urban environment are still connected to nature in a way that's meaningful and restorative to themselves, you know.
Let's talk about some of the future parks that are planned. They've not all been built, right?
Right. There's 1,400 acres of proposed new parks to take this old industrial land and make it into parks. The most significant of which is the West Side Park, the Quarry Park, which was just this harebrained idea that somebody had 16 years ago, literally. It's an old quarry. The idea is to fill it with drinking water from the river that will preserve 30 days of emergency drinking water for the city. So it's a technical, infrastructural kind of project also. That project, 16 years in the making, and about a month ago, the water started filling up. It's about halfway up the quarry now.
Oh, wow.
And they're starting to open the land around the quarry for the park itself. It'll be about 350-acre park. Really unusual with views of the city and, of course, of the quarry lake.
The Beltline has had and continues to have a huge impact on Atlanta. I also want you to talk about some of the exciting projects that you're working on right now that folks may not know about.
Great, yeah, I mean, it's made a big difference for me and for my life. Obviously opened a lot of doors. I live on it, I work on it, I'm doing projects on it, so I'm excited about that. Because I have a consulting practice right now that does this kind of work, so design of sort of big ideas and physical infrastructure. I'm doing a project with the Nature Conservancy right now on a 3,500 acre park in a underutilized, underperforming kind of part of town. Big landscape made up of landfills and truck yards, and
wow,
trying to make something else out of it. Obviously, with the success of the Beltline, I do a lot of speaking engagements, sort of talking about the Beltline all around the world, and everywhere you go, every city, every town, every community, those people are also doing something like it. It might be different, it might be a different scale, but it's similar enough that we can learn from each other, and so there's a real sort of exchange there. And started a nonprofit about big ideas. Obviously, I've got a lot of other ideas, but I meet a lot of people along the way. The nonprofit's focused around creating a platform for sharing those voices and those ideas with the world. So lots going on, but it's all fun.
That's wonderful. Ryan, thanks so much for spending the day with us. I'm so excited to see where your work's going. We really appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us.
Thanks for having me.
Another fascinating person who had a significant impact on the Beltline project is Kevin Burke, who worked as a principal landscape architect for the Atlanta Beltline. Kevin started his career working on high-end residences, and in time decided that he wanted to be involved in projects that change the fabric of the urban core and leave a legacy for future generations. Today we meet Kevin in one of my favorite parks on the Beltline to discuss his design philosophy and his role in this amazing project. Kevin, thanks so much for joining us.
Eric, I appreciate it. Happy to be here with you.
Wonderful. We just had a great conversation with Ryan, who really gave us more of an overview of the Beltline, the importance of that from a standpoint of urban development and planning. Your role, of course, is very central to the Beltline as one of the lead landscape architects. I want you to talk a little bit about the Beltline from a landscaping standpoint, as you think about the planting of it and kind of the overview of the scope of that project and what went into that.
So everything we've done was predicated on master plans done 10, 11, 12 years ago. We also have a partner in an organization called Trees Atlanta,
right?
Whose sole function is, as their name implies, planting trees throughout the city and a little bit beyond, and they've been doing this for 25 years. And they actually came up with the idea of the arboretum to be used in our transit corridor. A very unique process, 22 miles in length, but I'm pretty sure there's no other arboretum like this anywhere in the world. All of those plants are native, or in some cases what we call adapted. So they may not have been here when the Cherokee were on this land. They maybe came here 100 years ago. They're living quite comfortably and they're not invasive. They don't take a lot of work. So we've tried to focus on using those sorts of plants. My personal view on planting design, and particularly down here in Atlanta, is to try and have something when somebody walks into one of our parks or onto the trail, something will catch their eye almost every month of the year. And it might just be ornamental grass seed heads blowing in winter wind, but there's something that will attract your eye. And that's really a premise of how we've designed these parks.
One thing I think that is particularly special about the BeltLine over other types of like recreational trails that exist is that part of the central design and purpose of it was to connect a series of parks. And I want you to talk about how many parks are part of the BeltLine and what does that side of the project look like?
So there are roughly a little over 30 parks, either existing or planned, within a quarter to half a mile of our corridor. There's one in the Peoplestown neighborhood we rebuilt 8-9 years ago. We're really looking to provide as much outdoor space and amenities for the various neighborhoods. In addition to those parks, that 22 miles encompasses 45 distinct neighborhoods, all of them different in a myriad number of ways, and we're trying to make sure that as we go around, we're providing opportunities for park space to as many of those neighborhoods as is possible.
One thing that's also the case with the BeltLine is that in some of the sections that it runs through, it's an old rail line, and so some of the pieces of property that would be adjacent to it were not the hot, desirable piece of property that contractors were looking at building things on. And so part of the project was remediating some sections of land that were undesirable or challenging.
You're right, that really were the leftovers. In some cases, areas nobody really wanted to develop for whatever reasons, but also included, it varies, but a significant amount of contaminated soils. We've had to remediate leftovers from the pre-industrial times here in Atlanta so that people can come out and safely enjoy these open spaces.
Let's talk a little bit about the plants that are part of the design here. One thing that I think is particularly impressive is the diversity. There's so much to experience.
On our trails, one of the things in addition to Trees Atlanta's Arboretum is that we've utilized warm season native grass meadows with an idea that this 22 miles creates an amazing opportunity as a pollinator necklace, if you will, around the core of Atlanta. And by choosing the right plants, the right grasses, the right wildflowers, shrubs, things like that, we can do our best to increase environmental services, make the corridors resilient. It's not just the trees and the flowers. We have, I think they're field sparrows.
Wow.
That live in the grasses. Obviously snakes, I mean just a myriad host of flora and fauna. And that really, I think, is unique of what we're doing here in Atlanta versus almost anywhere else.
Kevin, let's talk some about what is one of my favorite parks in this whole trade of parks that are off the BeltLine, and that's the Old Fourth Ward Park. As a native Georgian, I remember this part of town fairly well, and it is very, very different. Talk us through the process of transforming this from, kind of a more burned out industrial part of town into this oasis in the middle of a city.
So I think first and foremost, as your viewers travel through the park, what they need to keep in mind is that the pond here, as nice as it looks, is actually serving the function as a stormwater detention pond. Off to the side, we have Pond City Market, recently renovated a number of years ago, now a destination here in Atlanta and regionally. And when Sears built that starting in 1926, it wasn't such a big deal that they chose the nexus point of 3 separate watersheds. Behind me is, you can probably see up the hill, Water flows down past us. There are 2 streets that come down by Pond City Market. So this pond, this stormwater pond, was functionally designed to alleviate that problem because we took out the issue of flooding. We now have, as an impetus, not just the park, but what goes on around it, over 3,000 apartments, housing units that didn't exist 12 years ago. And that really is key to the development of the BeltLine. I've been doing this now for almost 38 years, and this is one of my top 3 coolest projects I've enjoyed working on. I got to the BeltLine after the design had been completed, and as I like to say, that's probably why it's so iconic, because I didn't get to muddle on what was being done. But part and parcel to that was what makes it is the pond, that there's water in this the whole time, and that's predicated on we were able to get down to the water table. Because just as a stormwater pond, if this went dry and was a stinky mud flat, we wouldn't be standing here because it wouldn't be the park it is today. So that's really what makes it. All the plants, the bald cypress, sweet bay magnolias, river birch, everything down there is designed to periodically flood. So that was all part and parcel. When we get beyond the pond, we don't have that concern per se. On the north parcel, a number of years ago, we planted Tilia americana basswood. Tilia is one of my favorite plants. I can, to this day, remember the first time when I was in northern Utah, walking down a street, mature Tilia linden in full bloom, and the fragrance that comes out of that. It's just phenomenal. And I think that's part of what planting does. It's not just visual, but it can be olfactory too.
Why don't you kind of talk us through some of the more significant features so we get a sense of the scope of the park and what it offers the community?
So this is a 1/4-mile loop down in the bottom of the basin that was specifically designed that size so people who want to exercise and walk around know exactly how far they're going. When we built the theater at the end of the pond here, specifically at the request of the arts community, in the spring and fall, every single weekend, we had a wedding going on in that theater. And I mean, it's a great use. The north parcel where we have the lindens, it was designed as an event space. We've had concerts. The first concert in the park was the Lumineers. The Atlanta Wine and Food Festival was there last year. I mean, we've had all sorts of festivals.
It's been a fantastic space for the community. And in the upper part of the park also, there's this amazing skate park, huge open soccer field where many times in the evenings there'll be huge group yoga sessions going on, and pick up flag football. And it's amazing the way that this park has really galvanized this community. It is their outdoor space. A lot of the buildings around us are 8-10 story apartment living, and this is their backyard, and this is also why they live here.
The Trust for Public Land in 2016, a national organization, listed this park as one of the 5 top examples of integrating green infrastructure into a public park. It's an amazing recognition of what we've done here in conjunction with our consultants, in conjunction with the community. And one other thing I want to point out is that when we're building this project, be it the trail, be it a park, it's not about the day we cut the ribbon. This is a legacy project. What you see here today is going to look different in 20 years. It's going to look different in 50 years. As these parks build out over the next decades, it'll be remarkable.
It's an incredible endeavor. You should be super proud of it. It's beautiful. Kevin, thanks so much for spending the day with us.
Thank you, Eric.
Each week we travel the country north to south, east to west, visiting some of the most exciting gardens, as well as talking to industry horticulturalists about design principles, new plants, and also how you can be most successful with your home gardens. We also love answering your gardening questions, so visit us on the web at GardenSMART.com.
These moments of beauty and relaxation are brought to you by Proven Winners Flowering Shrubs, where every plant is performance tested, leaving you free to just enjoy. Find our award-winning shrubs at your local garden center.
Bring the outdoors into your everyday life. Bass Pro Shops can outfit all your adventures, even those in your backyard. Bass Pro Shops, your adventure starts here.
DRAM has been providing gardeners with professional equipment for over 75 years. DRAM products feature 9 water patterns and are designed to nurture your plants with a shower of rain. DRAM for lawn and garden, available at garden centers near you.
You have to rely on your gear. The way it feels, the way it does exactly what you need it to do. The F-Pace, how Jaguar makes it SUV.
Today we took a stroll on the Atlanta BeltLine, as well as getting a behind-the-scenes tour with one of its principal architects, as well as visiting one of its most impressive parks. If you have questions about anything you've seen today, visit us on the web at GardenSMART.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram. And remember, even if you're a master gardener, there's always more to learn. So join us next week for more great gardening tips and ideas as we garden smart.